pandemic continuing to take a huge toll on sporting activities. On tonight's Sports Scene, we take stock on how this decision will affect African football. Hello and a very warm welcome to Sports Scene here on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Welcome to the show. Let's check out what else is coming up tonight. Also coming up, our monthly Sportlight interview stars Uganda Rugby Sevens captain Michael Wokoraj. And more on the coronavirus pandemic as suspension of Senegal traditional wrestling sparks a furious reaction. Well, we set off from Cairo, where the postponement of the 2020 African Nations Championships earlier this week will have repercussions throughout the continent. CAF deferred the tournament scheduled to begin on the 4th of April due to the coronavirus pandemic. Adel Mahroui has more.
With the CHAN postponed, CAF has cleared all international matches scheduled in March and April. While that definitely creates a busier calendar once the games resume, the African Nations Championship may not greatly affect the more prominent continental titles.
I don't think that CHAN will have an impact on the calendar of African football. Players participating are usually bench players, those who are the second or even third in line. The core value of that competition is to shed light on new generations of football, other than those we see in regular African competitions.
While the African Nations Championship is not highly looked at in Africa, it was the only event that would have kept football activity ongoing. Its delay puts African football on a complete halt for over a month.
Many countries are suspending their activities for 2 weeks. No joint trainings will be happening. So when the players return after this self-isolation program, they will need at least 2 weeks to regain their normal physical fitness. That could be extended. It's a crisis. I don't think players will be ready and will need more time to bring football back to the standards we've seen before the virus.
COVID-19 comes at a time African football is squeezed in time. The Cup of Nations will be held 6 months earlier this year, and so does the Qatar World Cup. To make federations focus on these qualifications, critics are calling for the CHAN to be cancelled this year. While this newly born competition's cancellation might not have any significant impact on African football, CAF might not be able to do it. CHAN is part of CAF's advertising and airing rights contracts, so there cannot be any cancellation without financial consequences. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, Uganda has suspended all football activities until further notice as a precaution due to the coronavirus pandemic. The virus has, however, not been detected in the country yet, but the football governing body says it's not taking any chances. Hilary Ayesiga has more from Kampala.
Breaking sweat, probably for the last time for a while. Uganda's football is pausing.
We have also issued an internal communication to the national team to break off camp by today, following that all the tournaments and competitions that the team was going to be involved in have actually been postponed as a result of this virus.
The suspension also affects major tournaments.
FIFA has also cancelled the three-nation tournament that was due to take place in Uganda, with countries that had been invited, including Zambia and Mali, which was organized for preparation of our teams to participate in CHAN.
Football analysts are now worried about the long-term impact on the sport.
The impact is huge. It comes down to the players. There are clubs that have contracts with players. They're supposed to pay players. Most of them collect money through get collections. Not all clubs have sponsorships. And now that means there's going to be a big hit that will affect the families of the players.
This is usually a busy period for sportsmen in Uganda and Africa at large. But with the growing threat of coronavirus on the continent, players and fans may have to wait a little longer for action for the sake of their lives. Uganda's health ministry has issued guidelines on how to keep safe. They include no handshakes, wash hands with soap frequently, wearing masks, and keep away from crowds. With these measures in place, Uganda hopes to keep her population safe. Hilara Isga, CGTN, Kampala.
Well, CAF's decision to postpone the CHAN 2020 tournament due to the coronavirus has understandably left Zimbabwean football players who are aiming to make a mark frustrated. Zimbabwe was due to play in the tournament opener against Cameroon on the 4th of April.
Despite the postponement, a scheduled national team training session went ahead Wednesday, though players and management were resigned to the circumstances.
We want to compete, we are sportsmen, we are not office people. And for us, this is like a disaster. And football disaster, I can say like that. But, just we have to follow instructions until situation will be clear, then we have to keep continuing.
Loga Rusic was preparing for his first taste of competitive action with the Zimbabwe Warriors, many of whom were hoping for a breakthrough at the deferred tournament.
Yeah, it's for us players, it's hard because we want to go there and express ourselves so that other teams from overseas can take us and sign us. So it's a disadvantage for us.
The Warriors are expected to break camp and release players to their domestic clubs, where they will likely face more frustrating downtime. On Tuesday, President Emmerson Mnangagwa banned all sports events for the next 60 days, which will see the local league start pushed back.
If you ask me, it's a matter of choosing between life and death. So you can't compromise on your health. So that's the reason why we just have to follow what everyone else is doing. Of course, it's quite difficult in terms of preparations, but look, we just have to readjust our budgets and make sure that we cater for the time we are going to spend preparing even more.
That means practice, practice, and more practice, but no much desired game time.
You want to measure yourself playing those international matches and also playing league games. So hopefully the league will start soon. Until then,
It will be the unfamiliar game of watching and waiting for players not accustomed to being on the sidelines. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Right now, for more on the repercussions of the cancellation of the 2020 CHAN tournament, I'm now joined by Kunle Sailaja, who is a sports analyst and the editor-in-chief of the Sports Village Square from Lagos, Nigeria. Kunle, is postponing the tournament the right decision for CAF, especially after the body was accused in the past of delays in taking action following the coronavirus pandemic spread?
Can you come again?
I'm asking if postponing the tournament at this time is the right move, especially after CAF in the past was accused of delays in taking action in the wake of the coronavirus.
Well, I would say it's better late than never. The decision to postpone the African Nations Championship came very late, I think last week, and it appears CAF is always trailing the events that are global in nature. Virtually every competition, every governing body of every sports federation has been shutting down because of the rate at which the coronavirus was spreading. And I think 2 days before they even announced that they are postponing the CHAN, they were insisting that the competitions will go on and things were right. But it's good that they have taken a decision, even if that decision is coming very late.
Now, of course, this decision does leave CAF with a bit of a scheduling headache, especially considering that the 2021 AFCON finals qualifiers in Cameroon have also been pushed back. What do you see as the right way forward now in regards to CHAN 2020?
Well, it is natural that when things like this happen, there is bound to be congestion of fixtures. How to get the African Cup of Nations qualifying to continue, how to get the World Cup qualifying competition to continue, and how also have to get the CHAN to hold in Cameroon. What I would say now is that this is not peculiar to CAF alone. FIFA is also experiencing it as it's organizing the World Cup, as it's look forward to the World Cup qualifying series to continue in Africa, Asia, and South America. So also is Euro, the UEFA is also having the same problem of having the domestic leagues to continue to be concluded, and also having their European Championship and the Europa Cup to also come to a conclusive end. So it is not peculiar to Africa, but what it means is that while planning, we must always give a gap, a window for what is normally known in sports as force majeure.
Finally, Kunle, briefly, what lessons can African football now take, especially in the wake of the disruption of events from this coronavirus pandemic?
Well, it is clear that when planning, when having fixtures, always keep a window open for force majeure. This is not the first time it's happening in Africa. You remember that in the 2015 African Cup of Nations was to hold in Morocco, but Morocco pressed for a postponement of the tournament because at that time there was Ebola virus ravaging in West Africa. So, and they know that most countries that qualify from West Africa and their fans were likely to come to Morocco. But Morocco wanted to also protect the public interest, the public health, and they called for postponement, which CAF declined and later moved the championship from Morocco to Guinea, to Equatorial Guinea. So in a similar vein, when planning fixtures like this, always have in mind that there may be disruption, either through nature or even it could be political in nature, that there is a military coup in a country that is going to host your competition. So always have a plan B, that if this happens, this is what we are likely to do. And I think that is what CAF has not done, but they could still do it. And I see no reason why both the African Cup of Nations and the African Nations Championship cannot be postponed even till next year. And then we have a back-to-back edition of those competitions, as we had in 2012 and 2013, when CAF was shifting from the even numbered year to the odd number years in the hosting of the African Cup of Nations. So we can still have it, moving the African Nations Cup, African Nations Championship from 2020 to 2021, and then moving the Nations Cup from 2021 to 2022, so that we'll have a back-to-back edition of both competitions.
All right, Kunle, thank you very much for your insights there. Kunle Sailaja joining us live there from Lagos, Nigeria. Moving on, football fans and businesses in Tanzania have borne the brunt of the postponement of the 2020 African Nations Championship, as well as domestic club football due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Taifa Stars qualified as one of the 16 finalists for the CHAN tournament in Cameroon. Daniel Kijo with this report.
A sport millions in the country love now faces a nationwide ban. The government has suspended all footballing activities in the country to help stop the spread of the coronavirus.
Issues relating to health are a priority. That's why we're working with the government. We've agreed to stop all matches, all our leagues. We're now looking at the best way to action all that the leadership committee has decided.
Along with the ban, TFF has terminated the training of the national team, Taifa Stars, which was in camp preparing for the CHAN tournament to be staged in Cameroon. The tournament has been called off as well. It will affect the business of football.
So the negative effects would be issues relating to sponsorships and businesses connected to football. There will be challenges for brands that have sponsored and want their mileage.
Fans say they'll miss watching the matches but they've accepted the decision.
It has affected us because we wanted to see how our in-country players perform. In the Premier League, sometimes players from outside the country get more time to play. So CHAN was for our players, home players.
We have no choice. It's something that has to be done. It's like a sneeze. You can't stop it.
The Tanzanian Football Federation has strongly recommended football fans to strictly observe the measures and guidelines issued by the Ministry of Health. Football fans in Tanzania say they know that the COVID-19 outbreak here may only just be the beginning. The impact is being felt across the continent as government roll out measures to try and contain the spread. Football fans will now have to wait for this health crisis to pass before the game they love can return. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
And coming up. Our monthly Spotlight interview with Uganda Sevens rugby captain Michael Wokorach.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
So today on Spotlight here on CGTN, I'm more than pleased to have with us Michael Wokorach, who is a former 15s player and current 7s player with the Uganda team. Michael, thank you very much for joining us. I'll just begin by asking you about having captained club and country. You are a player who people have described as a leader, both on and off the pitch. Is this something that you feel came to you naturally, or did you develop it with time?
I think this was just a decision I made. Not only captaining my team and the country, I've actually captained my school team. So I think it's something that I took up and said, I think I have these leadership qualities, so I can take them on and see that I take it to the next level of captaining Uganda and seeing that everything goes on well with the teams I'm playing for.
Obviously, there's a sort of rivalry between Uganda and Kenya, and also in other sports as well. Is this something that's helpful and that builds the game and also helps sportsmen maybe elevate their performances?
If you talk about home here where Cobs and Heathens are playing, it's a very big derby. So one wants to prove a point to the other, and with that, we're trying to see that one gets more developed than the other and see if they can beat the other contentedly and all that. Same goes across the border, Kenya and Uganda. It's a big derby. It's between life and death. We always want to win because there's the saying, who owns the Mijingo Island? So this comes into the passion and everyone wants to play for it and see that they put up their country.
In September 2019, I believe you talked about stepping away from the 15s game and focusing on the 7s. What kind of conversations does a person have to have with themselves to come to that obviously difficult conclusion?
I did my thing for 10 years playing for the 15s, and still now it's 11 years playing for the 7s. So the decision I made was to cut down on one so I can concentrate on the other, because you realize if you're into both, it's a bit too much on the body. So yeah, I made that decision and said, let me part ways with the 15s and just continue with the 7s, because if you realize the 7s has a lot to achieve compared to the 15s, yeah?
Tell us about family in sports. Obviously, you get to play with your brother in the 7s outfit. Is there a bit of rivalry, camaraderie between the two of you?
Like they say, your brother is keeper, so when you're playing with the same team, you'd want to take care of him and make sure that all is going on for him and to protect him and see that you stay away from injuries and the bad things of the game. And definitely, the most important thing is that you both play well and see that you're representing very well.
What is it about rugby that makes a lot of former players desire to then go into the coaching setup after their careers on the pitch?
I think they're attracted because they want to pass on their skill to the younger generation and probably in future see another Michael Okorocha donning on that jersey. So we look up to the young ones and see, because we also went through the same ranks. So we'd want them to go through the same ranks and maybe us mentoring them to see that years to come we'll be on the stands and saying, okay, he looked up to me and I gave him the opportunity, I helped him do this and this. So I'm looking at getting into a managerial position or even technical. I'm looking at maybe doing strength and conditioning courses to see that we help, because that has been a major problem in Uganda. If you realize we don't really have so many strength and conditioning coaches here. We tend to import them from out there.
Talk to me about injuries. Obviously, it's something that the average person away from the sport doesn't understand, but what mentality does a sports person have to go through when they're on the sidelines and trying to get back to their very best?
I sat down and I looked at myself and said, I've already played for some time, I've played for Uganda for some time, maybe it is that time to hang up my boots. But then when I talk to people around my circles, they're like, it's not a time, these things will go through them. And definitely, when you play rugby, you've signed in for anything that happens in your life. We all know it's a risky sport because of the physicality and what you go through. But these are things you can't avoid in the sport. Even internationally, we've seen people get nasty injuries. But then how you build back your mental into coming back to the sport is what helps. If you get your mind together and say, this is the nature of the sport, you can't change something, the injury happened, and find a way of building back slowly and getting back to the sport. And I'm glad I didn't ditch that time, and I decided to come back to the sport because I went through the hard times and I said, okay, there are good times ahead as well.
And here's what's still to come. Suspension of Senegal traditional wrestling over COVID-19 pandemic sparks furious reaction. Welcome back. Well, many sports and cultural activities continue to be cancelled or postponed because of the coronavirus pandemic, and traditional wrestling, a popular sport in Senegal, has not been spared. The suspension of the sport has sparked furious reactions within the wrestling community. Tuli Shabalala brings us more.
The suspension of traditional wrestling in Senegal because of the COVID-19 pandemic has serious consequences for the thousands of young people who practice this sport. This West African country has recorded over 30 cases. Amateur wrestler Louis Theo Salom, for example, was expected to fight on Sunday, the 22nd of March, but his bout has been postponed indefinitely. The decision has deeply affected him, but he continues to train in the hopes of a rapid resumption.
Man proposes and God disposes. I was almost ready for the fight this Sunday, but I learned that it will not take place until further notice. This cancellation is due to the measures the authorities have taken to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. I put all my energy into preparing for this fight for months. I worked hard for it, but there's nothing we can do about it. The health of the population comes first. So I will continue my training as usual, and I'm remaining attentive to the authorities and the organizers to know the next date. I can't wait to crush my opponent.
The arrival of this disease in our country does not help us at all. The wrestling training centers are running idle, and we had several fights on the agenda this month and the next month, all of which have been postponed indefinitely. Even training is affected. Many wrestlers are not coming at the moment because of the coronavirus. The authorities have prohibited all sporting and other gatherings throughout the country. We want this disease to be eradicated so that we can relive our passion.
More than 100 wrestlers regularly come to train in Rock's Energy in Dakar. But in the last few days, the center only has about 10 athletes a day because of the new measures against coronavirus. These wrestlers want this pandemic to come and to end so they can resume their activities, as most of them have no other job.
I want you to know that the prohibition of our tournaments because of this coronavirus pandemic hurts me because I only live for this sport and the survival of my family depends on me. Traditional wrestling is my single job at the moment, and with these restrictive measures, I'm currently unemployed. We get our income from wrestling and we send our children to school with this income. The worst thing about this situation is that we do not know how long this epidemic will last and if it persists. The measures could be renewed. I am really sad that it has come to this point and we are living in constant anguish.
Wrestling was already facing its problems and this virus is making things worse. Our athletes needed competition. More and more of them are interested in this sport, but there are not enough competitions to absorb them all and allow them to live their dream. Usually we had wrestling fights every weekend. It allows at least some of them to express themselves. But if these competitions are now suspended, we don't know how we're going to make it. It's a shocking time for us.
Traditional Senegalese wrestling is a contact sport. These competitions bring together thousands of fans, but the arenas have been empty since the announcement of the ban of gatherings of more than 50 people. This is a hard blow not only for the wrestlers, but also for the fans of this sport that rivals football in popularity in this West African country. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
And that's all for Sports Scene this week. Do remember that you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen now and give us a follow on our digital media platforms. Thanks for watching. I'm Mahia Mutua. We end this edition with a look back at the top figures in world football that have tested positive for coronavirus as the sport continues to take the lead in global efforts to combat the pandemic.